Welcome to the Heat of Command podcast, mastering the art of fire service leadership.
Where we, your hosts, aim to teach you how to use introspection and self-reflection to be your most authentic, genuine self, leader, and human being.
And now, here are your hosts. This is Kyle Matusik.
And Kerry Henderson. Thanks for joining.
Welcome to the Heat of Command podcast. I am Kyle, one of your hosts, and today, we've been kind of going down this road of growth in leadership and struggles and kind of hitting on that and the grit of leadership. And one of the topics that I don't think we really touched on too much, and we're going to dive into a little bit today, is leading through the resistance. When things don't go your way, even though you're trying something or trying to do something, or you're in a conversation and you're met with pushback, or you develop a plan and everything just starts going awry and not your way due to so many different variables. But something to look at is, how do we build that resilience to turn around and keep going? And then what can we take away from those experiences to continue to learn and grow as leaders? So it's really about when things don't go your way, because to be honest, most of the time, or a lot of the time at least, things tend to not go our way. We get this idea in our head, this thought in our head of how things are supposed to go, how a conversation's supposed to go, how, a fire scene is supposed to go, or a stressful EMS incident is supposed to go. And a lot of times they don't go the way we want them to go. And I think we have a good amount of resiliency when it comes to running emergency scenes, but I don't think we have that same level of resiliency when we're leading within the four walls of the firehouse, and beyond within organizations. So it'd be interesting to see why we're so good in those stressful situations and not in the unstressful situations. But I think it's something worth examining and taking a look at and having a conversation about.
Yeah, I think this is a great topic. And it's a tough topic, right? We like to talk about the wins, and we like to talk about the times we were successful in the four walls of the firehouse and when we're successful in emergency scenes. And we don't talk about what to do when things are challenging or difficult. And I think for me, when I heard you mention this topic, my mind immediately went one way, but I think this really could go two ways, and we can talk about both. One is, what kind of pushback are you getting? Are you getting pushback that maybe it wasn't your idea that was selected, but it still meets like the alignment of where the department or organization needs to go? That's a different kind of pushback. And that's kind of where I thought we were going at first, until you really explained it a little better, is what do you do when it's not your idea, or it wasn't your suggestion that is what is picked or what you go with, but you still are, the team is still the goal, right? It's not the individual, the team is still the goal. And to try to, how do you reframe that and not get your feelings hurt and still remember the mission? And that even if it wasn't your idea, and even if you still think your idea is better, that how do you move past that and remember the mission and the team, that you're in it as a team. But then, what you're talking about too is when you're meeting resistance and really there is a need for change, and really your goal and your push is to make something better, and you're not getting anywhere with that. So it's two different ways I think we could go with that.
Yeah, and I think both are worth examining. I don't know if this is probably a good jumping off point or starting point, but one of the things that I really think about a lot is, we've talked about time and time again the hard conversations and sitting down with your people and having real conversations about, growth, strengths, weaknesses, goals, the whole nine yards. And, a lot of times these can be uncomfortable conversations. And if we approach them the wrong way, they're going to be even more challenging. But I think one of the things that is easy to face and confront during a hard conversation is defensiveness. So when we look at things not going your way, and you're, let's just say you're planning to sit down with someone and have a conversation about some tough stuff, some areas you'd like to see growth, how to best approach that, knowing that you're probably going to face some type of pushback or defensiveness. And we have to be able to combat that, because no matter how you put something, sometimes immediately when people get into those conversations, their defenses go up. And it's very interesting to me that no matter what, in a lot of circles and areas of life, like that is the norm. And how do we get there? It's like you can't even have a conversation that you want to help somebody without somebody getting offended or defensive about the issue. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. No need for defensiveness here. I'm here to help you. And I understand the conversation's tough, but like I'm thinking big picture, like no one's in trouble here. Like this is about growth. It's just weird that we're here and we're having this conversation. So that's a little soapbox. So so first off, like that one-on-one, the conversations, you have this idea of what you want the outcome to be, how you're going to approach it, and then boom, that person sits down and they get defensive right away. Like that's a tough one.
Yeah, it is. And I think of 1,000 things when you
Right.
bring that up. So excited. But first, it comes to mind that for me, and I know for so many people, especially people probably my age in the fire service, that defensiveness is a defense mechanism.
Yep.
Because the fire service I grew up in, and I think it's a little different now. It's not 100% there, but I think it's a little maybe. I know, and in some places
Yeah.
it's not. So I should not say that. But you couldn't screw up.
Yeah.
There was no room for mistakes,
Right.
right? And I get that our job, we should be really good at it, right?
Mhm.
People's lives depend on it, but we're human beings and we're learning.
Right.
We're learning every day. Like I've been in the fire service 25 years this year, and I'm still learning all kinds of stuff.
Right.
And so it you had to be defensive because you had to have an excuse,
Right.
right? There
Yep.
had to be some kind of excuse of why, like if you're coming to me to address something, well, this is why I did that. You immediately got defensive. And it has taken me so much work. And that is still probably one of my biggest flaws is not getting defensive, because if I want to continue to learn and grow, I have to be able to accept feedback, even when it's hard to hear. And so you have to like rewire your whole emotional being and your whole, brain to be able to do that. And I still find myself like, if somebody wants to come in like, well, why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you include me in this or whatever? I'm like, well, listen, this is why, blah, blah, blah. You don't understand. Oh, no, 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 no. Hey, let me hear where you're coming from. Like, I get it. You felt left out and I should have included you in that decision. You're 100% right. But let me show you how I made that decision and let's talk through making it better in the future. But yeah, we're programmed that way.
Yeah, and I think that's a hard shift in our culture, right? And it's very challenging to like how do you change that on a global level? And I think that's very hard to do. So it's like knowing that as a leader, all right, if you're going in for a conversation, a professional development conversation, we'll put, because I don't want any negative connotation over what we're speaking about, but you're going to face that defensiveness. You're going to get pushed back and people are going to defend their case. But we all, at the same token, we all know we all have weaknesses. And if you don't, well, you got another problem. But we all have weaknesses. So if it's just a simple thing about having these weaknesses, it's overcoming that obstacle, knowing you're going to face it. And sometimes we can pre-plan for those, right? We can prepare to know that things aren't going to go the way we want, but I can develop a strategy to get it back on track. And one of the things that I tend to think about in those situations is leaving it open-ended questions and making it so the person you're speaking to almost owns up to that weakness or that thing you want to talk about. So it's a strategy, honestly, I use with my kids. Like when they do something wrong, I never want to tell them they did something wrong. I want them to tell me they did something wrong. Like that's always the goal when I sit down with my kids and they knew they messed up. I just want them to tell me, just own it. And you tell me, because the second you tell me, you own it instead of me telling you and you get defensive. So it's like ownership of those weaknesses. So allowing to have that conversation where somebody is able to own it, because as soon as they answer that open-ended question in a way you want, boom, that door opens and those defenses are going to slowly and surely come down. So it's looking at, asking not approaching a situation where, hey, these are your strengths, boom, boom, boom. Here are your weaknesses, boom, boom, boom. And you're just telling someone, it's openings. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? This is where we agree. This is where we don't, blah, blah, blah. And again, this is much easier said than done. And it's very challenging because at the same token, every single person is different as well. So we have to change our approach every single time. What might work in this scenario is not going to work in this scenario. So we can see that leadership is very challenging. But I think a lot of times things don't go our way, but we also can prepare for some of those things.
Yeah, and I think what I've seen is if you can't stay calm, you're going to lose it. You're going to lose that conversation. And if you go to that same place, the person you're talking to is defensive, then you're defensive, and it keeps up and going up and up and up. But I've seen so many times where if a person is able to remain calm, it's so disarming. If I can just sit there and just maintain a very calm voice, very calm and open body language, it's so disarming to someone that they're like, why is she, still so calm about this? Like, because there's no need to bring a ton of emotion into it, right? We're not usually talking about, murder.
Right.
We're having conversations to improve whatever it is. And you have to stay calm. So I would say that's my very first recommendation is find a way to calm your brain, to calm your tone of voice. And I get very quiet. And I didn't realize I did this. I had someone I work with point this out to me. So we were having a very heated discussion with someone that was going through an acting captain process, and they did not agree with us not clearing them to be an acting captain. They'd gone through some scenarios and we didn't clear them. And so it was getting very, very heated. And I got quieter and quieter and quieter. So he had to kind of calm down and listen to me. And someone pointed that out to me. And I was like, I need to put that in my toolbox and remember to use that again. So that's my first thing. And I would say second is you have to be very objective. So this kind of goes into what you were talking about when you get your kids to kind of own up to things. It has to be, if you're going to, talk to someone about something or you want to bring about change, it has to be very objective things because then you can't really argue that.
Right.
Right. So it's, this is what I see in our organization, or this is what I see in the group dynamics of our shift, or, that our company, or this is what I've seen you personally, your performance. And this happened on this date and it happened again on this date. And what do you think about that? And then, like you said, let them kind of talk through that stuff. The third thing, and then I'll be quiet for a minute.
Oh, no, yeah. That's good stuff.
And I learned this from some other departments that do this when you're in the training environment, and it works just about in any time you're giving feedback, is we always, if we're doing EMS, we started it in EMS training first, is after a scenario, we say, what did you think? Talk us through what you did. So now we do it in fire training as well. Talk us through what you did. And we always let the person leading it go first. And they say, okay, well, I came in and I had this patient and I found this, and oh man, I missed this initially. I really should have controlled bleeding first. And then, like you said, they own all their mistakes and there's very little we usually have to point out. And we say, yeah, very good. You recognize that you missed, controlling the bleeding first before you jump to whatever. And next time I'm sure you'll remember that. Yeah. It works much better when they own it themselves. And it feels less yuck to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's ownership, right? And there's no need for, to get to a point where you don't even have to have a conversation anymore because it's all out in the open and everybody's aware. And, I think the cool thing is to be able to have that environment where you can have that openness and discuss your mistakes without being, ridiculed and talked about, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, it's a huge cultural it's so different, right? It's so different than the culture we have found ourselves in and what it's been for so long. And so it's that slow incremental change on trying to, you know. And again, that's just like one example, is to sit down with your people and talk about strengths, weaknesses, or whatever, or professional development, or just have a hard conversation to fix some type of shortcoming, whatever the case may be. Is, we can anticipate those not going our way. And when we face that defensiveness or we face that pushback, what is your alternative strategy? And Kerry hit it on the head with her 3 bullet points there. And it's just utilize those in those scenarios. So if you start, Kyle and Kerry don't know what they're talking about, and you get in a situation, all of a sudden you're facing pushback and defensiveness, boom, now we can start utilizing some of the strategies, we just discussed. But that's like one portion of leadership, right? And leading where things don't go your way. And I know you wanted to touch on a further kind of expanding that away from just conversations, but maybe projects or training or emergency scenes. When things don't go your way, how do we become resilient in those, I guess?
Yeah, and oh gosh, there's 1,000
Yeah,
things that
it's
come to
so
mind.
much.
There's
It's
so
so
much.
much.
But, I like to think, okay, was it the wrong time to ask for that? And how do I repackage this to ask it again next time? Especially if it's something I really, really firmly believe in. It's got to be the right time. And if you've never worked in an administrative position, it's hard to know all the thousands of things that your executive staff is trying to get accomplished. So everyone has 10 projects. So like your training division probably has 10 goals they're trying to work on. Your EMS division probably has 20 goals they're working on. Your budget person, if you're doing accreditation, they've got goals that they're working on. Well, you can't get them all done at one time. So I have to understand the culture of, like, the vibe, like what's going on this year that I can get done. And if it's the wrong time, because sometimes, like, I think this thing is really important. And I'm like, I don't understand why you guys don't think this is as important as I do. And I have to remember, like, okay, they have these other priorities too. So I saw somewhere it said, I think this is so good for firefighters. Don't burn the bridge just because you couldn't cross it today. It's like before I would get so just been out of shape. Like, I just don't understand why you don't see it my way. So it's definitely some emotional regulation, and we've talked about that a lot. And teaching the people around you to lose with grace, because I've seen, and I am guilty of this, and I can remember a very specific time where I was a young captain and I did not agree with a new operational policy that came out, and I did not handle it well. And I was even spoken to about my behavior about not handling it well because I did not agree with it. And I was not modeling good leadership. I was mad, and I didn't understand why we were going in that direction. And instead, I should have lost with grace. I should have been quiet and asked in private and gotten it more explained to me more, and it would have gone over a lot better. So I think teaching your people how to lose with grace, and what goes along with that is, and this is like a question I've seen so many times in interviews, and people lie through their teeth. So that they'll ask, what do you do if the fire chief or your chief has a policy that you don't agree with? And everyone says, oh, I support the mission and I go along with it no matter what, because, that's what I always hear. Well, that's not true. And I didn't do it. So I say, hey, I struggle with that. And I like to be bought in and understand the why, so that I can, but at a certain point, I have to remember that whole don't burn the bridge because you couldn't cross it today, and have some grace, and it's coming from somewhere. And so I think it's important to, as a good leader, to model that for other people. Like, you can't trash the people just because you don't agree with them. So you can't turn around and go, that was stupid. Like, I don't agree with that. That wasn't my idea. That was so stupid. I'm not going to follow it because it wasn't what I came up with, or it wasn't what I thought should happen. Yeah, screw them. Like, because then that perpetuates that cycle of everyone doing that. So.
Yeah, you got to act as you want to be treated, right? And I think a lot of times we don't hit that on the head very well. Like there's been many times in my career where, the emotions get the best of you, and, younger, you're mature, and as you learn, you live and grow. And, that's the goal of it all. But you hit on something, you said you got to start with the why, when you're talking about the SOPs and like why, get me to buy in. But I think on a bigger picture, it's that why question is huge. Because if you get that pushback or something doesn't go your way, the question is why. Simon Sinek's book, leadership book, Start With Why, I think is kind of will define this a lot further. But if we understand why something didn't go our way, it's going to give you more information and maybe more of an understanding as to why, instead of just getting angry or, your emotions getting the best of you. But when we clarify the why, now we're leading from a certain direction, right? And if we're looking at projects or working within other teams or groups and everybody's why is different, like we could prevent some of this stuff from not going your way. I think that, as we're sitting here talking, it's like a lot of our strategies are like, well, don't get yourself into these situations where things won't go your way. Understand that things won't. And sometimes you have to give the control over to somebody else for their growth, whether you agree or not. Like Kerry said, everything's full circle here. But we have to understand the why behind everything. So if you're not on the same page with somebody doing a project, or you want to institute new policies or training, but both your whys are different, well, either A, how are they going to get to be the same? Or B, should maybe that working group not be together? And define, the higher ups can define the actual why. Well, we want to train more on truck operations. This person wants more engine. Like, how can we do both? How do we still collaborate? So we can prevent some of these things from not going our way. And then specifically when we're looking at projects, it's getting in a team where everybody's why is kind of the same. So if we want to shift the culture of an organization, who's in your organization that's going to help you do that? Don't go in a group where everybody's against you, because nothing will ever go your way, right? You're going to get stumped, there's going to be a stampede over you. So find those people, So I think a lot of times when we start looking at when things don't go your way, it's, well, how can I prevent things from not going my way? And I think there's a lot of strategies that we can do that we've been discussing that will allow you to not even be confronted with this, in all honesty. Start with why. Why are we doing anything? Why, when we go on a fire scene, what's our goal? And in today's industry, we have people who are risk averse versus we're still going in with an uncharged hose line and we're going to search ahead of a hose line. Like, those are two completely different tactical outlooks. Like, is it the same in your organization, or one company officer is different than the other? So we have to define that why, and that's so important. I like that you brought that up. I mean, that is like a whole episode in and of itself, but I think it fits really well here when things don't go your way. A lot of times we are not understanding why people are the way they are. They make the decisions they are. And then, full circle, Kerry and Kyle style, it comes all back to empathy and compassion. Like, look at this, Kerry. Boom. I mean, it's just crazy. Like, all this stuff is so connected. And it's that why is so important in so many aspects of leadership, because the more you know why, the less resistance you're going to face.
Yeah, it's interesting. We went through several years of kind of awkward growth in our fire department, where we were trying to really figure out who we were and where we wanted to go, because in the grand scheme of things, a pretty young department. And I'm not talking just about the age of the people that work there, because we're also young there. I'm talking about the length of time that the fire department has been a fire department. So we're always trying to kind of figure things out. And we went through these few years where it was like we'd go this way and then we'd kind of go this way. And I think people felt adrift a little bit, and people kept asking the fire chief, like, where are we going? What's your vision? And he's like, well, I don't want to just spout some, Kerry term, inauthentic thing out there of what my vision is. I really want it to be something real for us. And so we kind of ebbed and flowed for a while, and, people were kind of restless, and people kept saying to him, just tell us what you want us to do. That's what we want. We want you pick, like, are we source pumping? Are we relay pumping? Are we doing this? Are we doing that? Just tell us. And he's like, that's not really what you want. And they're like, yes, it is. And he's like, I'm telling you, it's not what you want, because as soon as I do that, if it wasn't the idea that you had, you're going to be like, I'm not doing that. So it boils down to that. Everyone has to understand the why, and everyone has to have some sort of buy-in. And even if it wasn't your idea, you have to understand the team goal, the team objectives, and why the decision was made. So there was so many like teams meetings with all the stations, and there was so much trying to gather like input. Some people wouldn't talk and some people would talk. And it was just this whole couple years of like, yes, we really truly want the feedback and we want you to understand why the decisions are being made so that you will go along with it. So we don't get the defensiveness. And it was just interesting because so many people were like, just tell me what you want me to do. Like, I promise you, you don't want that.
I'm laughing over here because
I see you.
it sounds like conversations between me and my wife. Because, like, a lot of times I get home from work and she's asking me 20 questions. I'm like, just answer them. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't want to make a decision. I want to take a break. And she's like, I know if I make a decision, you're not going to like what I make. And I'm like, all right, there's some truth behind that, especially when it comes to food and dinner. So it's so fun. It's so true, and we can let that get the best of us, and it's just kind of funny how it portrays in every aspect of life too.
Every aspect.
Yeah, I think one
Yeah.
of the go ahead. Go, you.
It's funny because my therapist always everything like whenever I'm in therapy always boils down to my like need for control.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Why are you trying to control that?" I'm like, because it feels better if I can."
Right.
And she's like, "Okay, can you let it go?" I'm like,
Right.
"Yeah, but you don't understand. My career wired me this way."
Yeah, I know, and it's so hard to rewire and unwire that, right? That control thing is just, it's bad because at the end of the day, we got no control, right? Yep. The one thing, our responses to setbacks, I think, is and when things don't go your way, like how we respond to that really defines us as leaders. And I think the biggest thing and misconception, I think a lot of times people think leaders are measured by their success and what they've accomplished, but alone, no, right? It's how they handle these situations when things don't go their way and how they handle those setbacks and how they bounce back and what they do and how they keep learning and moving forward, and I think when you look back at the great leaders, it's that they were able to do this stuff. It's not, they didn't care about the medals and the awards and the titles or none of that stuff. It's how they responded to the setbacks, how they bounced back, how they tried to understand their why, everybody's why, and, just overcome the difficulties that many leaders, if not all leaders, face on a regular basis.
Yeah, good leaders get beat up.
Yeah.
Right? They do because they're trying to do the right thing and they get pushed back, but they just keep keeping on, and they use it as fuel to think how to do it differently, to think how to approach things differently, how to, they're what the emotional component of it is. But yeah, I feel like good leaders, take some beating sometimes because if you're always just saying yes and you're always just, you know, I think sometimes there's a misconception like good leaders, like, oh, I want to work for that guy or that girl. Well, maybe it's because they're easy on you,
Right.
right? They don't push you. But a really good leader that somebody wants to work for is pushing you, and they're hard on you and tough on you and high expectations. And that's what we're talking about here. And they know how to take a step back and reflect on it instead of like ruminate on it. They reflect on it and they don't dwell on it and let it eat at them. Because I've definitely been involved in stuff where it eats at me and I'm like, man, and I have to reframe it. And sometimes I'm good at it and sometimes I'm not good at it.
Yeah, it's a tough game, and I want to kind of give a little insight. Maybe I'm a big firm believer that in order to be a good leader, at one point you were or still are a good follower. I think in every aspect of life, you have leaders and you have followers, and to be part of either one is a-okay. Not everybody's meant to be a leader, not everybody's meant to be a follower, and vice versa, and all that. But for the followers out there and the young people out there, a lot of times we try not to understand what is going on. And a lot of times there is a much bigger picture that you might be unaware of, and you don't understand the why of the higher ups in an organization, or you don't understand why things are happening. I know a lot of young people want to know why, but sometimes you're just not going to. So when these times come and you're faced across the desk from a superior and they want to have a conversation, my encouragement to you is to go into it open-minded and not to get defensive, because at a young age, you can start developing some pretty awesome leadership abilities and understand the characteristics of a good leader. So when you're facing those situations, it's staying open-minded and having the conversation with the thought that this is for my growth. This is to make me better. And again, not every organization and people are like what we are talking about here, and I understand that. But just overall, as you grow, even if you have those people who aren't necessarily leaders, but they're in a position of power and they use power and control, right? Like, go into those conversations open-minded, see what you can learn from that. When you're young and you get a part of projects or other groups within your organizations and things don't go your way, understand why, like examine why. Don't be so hard set on your thoughts, your opinions, and all these things, because you're going to get beat down and you're setting yourself up for extreme failure. You need to have an open mind. Stay true to who you are and your values, absolutely. And I'm not saying get rid of that, but have an open mind. And then when things don't go your way, how are you going to bounce back? Are you going to let that get the best of you? Because I'm here to tell you, and I'm sure Kerry will share, like, we have let it get the best of us, and that no growth happens there, right? Just anger, resentment, and all these horrible emotions that just waste time. So what can you learn from those setbacks and then bounce back from? And then when we look at scenes and tactics and how we fight fires and respond to EMS stuff, if there's something that you value and you're passionate about and you want to change and you're young, start developing the whys behind it. It's not, oh, we should be doing this instead of that because I saw a TikTok, right? No, we can't do that. Like, do your research, make a plausible argument in front of your superiors. And even if they say no, like, look at what you just learned. So again, as you start getting in this career and you're learning and growing, like, use these strategies, because in 10, 15 years, you're going to be an amazing leader if you already have these characteristics that we're trying to change in our culture that are so deep rooted. This is a true opportunity, like, just to hit the ground running and just go.
Yeah, and I think, like, I love when we are able to give our listeners like a challenge. So I think this week for our listeners, like, lean into something that disappointed you and lean into something where maybe a decision or something didn't go your way, or you got flack for a decision that you made, and really lean into that and decide, how are you going to come out of that and set a good example, right? So maybe you winning isn't the best example of leadership you could show. Maybe it's how you lose. Maybe it's showing people how you handle disappointment and you handle the loss. That's not quite the right term, but like how you handle that disappointment. And that is the best example of leadership that you're showing them. So this week, this month, lean into some of those times where you're not getting your way, or your decision isn't the one, or you're getting flack over something. Like, lean into that, and how are you going to model that, and how are you going to come out of it on the other side? And is it still supporting the mission, even if it's not your plan or idea? And sometimes it's not. Sometimes, you may feel like this is not supporting the mission, and how I feel about it is different than everyone else, but you still have to learn to overcome that.
I think that is a great challenge. And, just to piggyback off of that, and there was no correlation to this episode. And if you're not aware, the 2025 Thought Leadership Essay Contest has been put out by Darley. So you could go to their website, darley.com, and take a look, and you could enter into this contest. And we're talking about why here on our episode. And this year's topic is understanding the why behind mental health struggles in the fire service. Are firefighters really so unique? So your thoughts on that, and, submit that, and some great opportunities that come from that. So it's just a little ironic. Like, I didn't even realize we were talking about why, and then this is the topic that just opened up for Darley. So yeah, there's two things for you to sit and contemplate and work on over the next week or so, and, get the work in.
Yeah, absolutely. And until next time, we hope you all have an amazing week. and we will chat soon.
As we wrap up another episode, this has been Kyle
and Kerry
from the Heat of Command podcast.
Thank you, as always, for listening. Please make sure to follow and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And as always, we love the feedback. Keep it coming.
See you next time.